Yeah, so
Anyway, let's go to
Oh, the height.
Yeah, it's not the here.
Welcome everyone.
Yes, it looks like an eight.
Just on 1 o'clock, I think we should get
Oh,
underway.
Yeah. And then this we
Bring Mary in down there.
It's the beauty about this.
Yeah.
Make it a lot easier for you.
Right.
I know from following your meeting.
All right, we'll get underway. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the Science and Resilience Committee, a restructure from the Safety and Resilience Committee. Welcome to those online. Welcome to those in the room. What we might do is open up the current here from Councillor Somerville, please, and then I'm going to ask General Manager Tom Dyer just to give us an update on how this committee has restructured from what it previously was.
Thanks, Gary. Yes, I'll just open with the karakia. Tuia ki runga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki waho, tuia ki roto. Tuia ki te hiri tangata, ka ronga te pole, ka ronga te o, homia huia taiki. Unite above and below, within and without. Unite as one, listen to the light. In the world of light, now we come together as one.
Thanks, Tom. Tom.
Thank you. So this is obviously now the Science and Resilience Committee, and is the amalgamation of a couple of different areas. In the past, we've had the Safety and Resilience Committee, which our civil defence, natural hazards, and engineering papers would typically come to. We've now got the Science and Resilience Committee, so that includes the addition of science technical papers, papers from our environmental monitoring team. Yeah, that's it. So those papers used to formally go to the Science and Policy Committee.
Right, great. Thanks for that. We may have some noise issues from outside and the roadworks underway. Can you hear down there, Councillor Moon? Like you're hearing
I
it.
hear the noise outside. Right, come closer if you wanted to.
Yeah. So we have had to manage that this morning, and we'll may have to continue to manage that this afternoon.
Pull your microphone up.
Yeah, fix the noise issues from the
That's
past.
way better. But
Okay. Great, thank you. So we're hopeful the roadworks will be not as noisy as they were this morning. We've got a very full agenda, so we're going to try and work to a relatively timely fashion, but we do have some quite big papers, and we have some guests in the room relating to those, so we'll try and give them the time they are due. And so I believe we have no apologies. I think we're all here. We have no public forum. We are confirming the agenda. I don't think we have any changes necessary for the agenda. Just a reminder of our declarations of interests. We have no presentations. So we'll move to confirmation of the minutes. These are confirmation of the previous structure minutes for the Safety and Resilience Committee, 6 March 2025. Is there someone prepared to move those? Councillor Somerville, thank you. Councillor Weir, seconded, thank you. Everyone happy? All in favour? Aye. Against? It's carried, thank you. There are currently no open actions for the committee. So we will move to our first paper, 9.1, Otago Deepwater Lakes Technical Advisory Group. Update. Welcome along, everyone. Ben, Tom, I'll let you do the introductions, please.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. Just run through the introductions first. I've got a few TAG members here to support the paper and answer any questions. Online, we have Dr. Clive Howard-Williams from NEWA. To my left, Jason Augsburger, a principal scientist here at ORC. Dr. Mark Schellenberg from the University of Otago, Ben Youngman, who's the Science and Research Manager at Waiwanaka, and Dr. Dean Olsen from Freestone Freshwater Consultancy. So thanks for coming on. Just a bit of background to why we're here. The tag was established last year following inquiries in 2002 from the PCE about ORC's role in managing the Upper Lakes. The tag itself comprises 16 scientists from NIWA, Landcare Research, DOC, MFE, a couple of universities, consultancies, and Waiwanaka. The tag reports to a management working group and has quite a defined terms of reference. Previously, you would have seen a report that was taken to the Environmental Science and Policy Committee back in December. That report covered knowledge gaps and key questions about the Upper Lakes. At that committee, we were requested to report back by the end of June. So here we are. The remaining task for the tag was to develop some potential work programs to address the knowledge and information gaps about the Upper Lakes. So essentially today we're presenting a report outlining some potential deep lake research and monitoring programs. These largely stem from a 2-day workshop we held up in Wanaka back in February. There's 3 options at 3 different levels of investment, ranging from about $2 to $20 million over a 10-year period. The intent of the report is really to show the sort of level of knowledge that can be gained at a range of different investment levels, and specifically how the programs will enable evidence-based management of the lakes. We'll stress that the work programs are examples and they'll need a lot of refinement to develop specific details. Appreciate it's probably a bit of sticker shock at the price of some of the proposals, and certainly open to exploring external funding sources if that's required. So really today we're seeking guidance from the council on the level of investment that the council might be interested in supporting for deep lake monitoring and research. And if we get this guidance, the tag would plan to go away and develop more detailed work programs for further consideration. If we have a number to work with, we can come up with a more sort of concrete proposal. That's pretty much the intro from me. So happy.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think what we'll basically do, we've all read the report. Thank you for it. There's a lot of detail in there. We have 3 quite different proposals and options to discuss, and yeah, I think it's great having members of the tag in the room. I think that's really useful. So basically we'll throw it open for questions. Councillor,
probably more a question for Tom than the tag. Just regarding what would come next after an investment, regardless of sort of which option we do go with and what degree of knowledge we invest in. Just wondering what scope we do have as a regional council to improve or protect the health of these lakes based on the information we get. You know, would that just be to inform broader plans and regulatory functions, or would that also be a first step in us taking some other further direct action on these lakes? If that makes sense.
So yeah, we do have a level of evidence already and a level of information, and you might recall that one of the reasons for the 2022 dialogue with the PCE was a report to the former Science and Policy Committee regarding some trends and nutrient trends within the lakes themselves. But we would stress though that information is reasonably limited in the scheme of total evidence of that you might want to seek for in terms of understanding these types of lakes. And so we just, I guess where we're at now is that we could continue to undertake the programs we're undertaking, but it would take a long time to get to a place where we're still substantially limited in terms of having great information for having good conversations with our community about change in practice that might result in change in the lakes and all of that sort of thing. But this paper is designed to give you an idea and the report that is attached to it is designed to give you an idea of what that, what an appropriate level of funding would be to get us to a desired endpoint. And so the $20 million proposal talks to, being able to evidence a good chunk of things, being able to steer any future direction in a way that's that is probably appropriate and in keeping with our community's expectations.
Okay, cool, thank you. Tim and then Alan.
You've given us quite a range of proposals from 2 million to 20 million. It's quite extensive difference. Obviously, we sort of need to know what we're going to get in each of those proposals. I know you've got some of the stuff down there, but in terms of our annual plan, we I think 2 years ago we did our 10-year annual plan, a long-term plan, and we would have had some costing in there for some sort of work around this. Is there anything currently in our long-term plan that can match what's been proposed here, or do we actually have to add in an extra 2 million to 20 million in our next annual plan?
So all these proposals assume that the current level of funding and the current lake research carries on. So anything here would either be additional or require rearrangement of existing budgets.
Yeah, additional. Yep.
Yes, and that currently sits at about 600K per annum, which includes staff on a few other bits and pieces.
Cool. Alan.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One, I wonder if you could just give us a bit more background, I suppose, on the consequences and or the risks of not having fuller information about what's happening with those deep lakes.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. I guess the way I look at it is that current monitoring and probably the lower level of investment here is more around reactive management. You'd be monitoring, you'd be looking to see how things are changing without having a deep understanding of how the ecosystem's responding to a variety of environmental stressors. And the increased levels of investment would provide a deeper understanding of how the lakes respond to the multiple stressors that are there, and to enable proactive management. So management that could actually inform planning rather than reactive management where you're reacting to already, a trend that you're already seeing, something like that. Yeah.
And my understanding is with a great big lake like that, once a trend is underway, it's been happening for a long, long time. Is that likely to be the case?
Yeah, these lakes have what's called quite a long water residence time. It takes a long time for the water to flush through these lakes. So any changes in the catchment would have sort of a slow initiation, but then would be like trying to change course of the Titanic. It takes a long time to change the course of once these lakes start to move in a certain direction. That's basically what happens with these sorts of large, deep lakes. Yeah.
Okay.
Just to add to what Mark was discussing there, there are approaches that you could take with a low level of information to try to manage the lakes. That would be by necessity be conservative. So you would have to take precautionary policies in place that might restrict the ability of landholders to do certain activities on their land, and you would have to err on the side of caution to make sure that you don't overshoot. There is always the risk that you would overshoot anyway, whereas the higher investment level provides a greater level of certainty around outcomes and trying to predict what the trajectory might be in the future, and so may allow for a more permissive policy regime.
Yeah, thank you. I understand. And I've got one more question. Is that right? I guess that level of investment, the suggestion here, that proposal one was $20 million over 10 years, the estimate. but there's no suggestion that the ORC is providing all that $20 billion. Could you just give a bit more detail about what other sources of funding could be available to feed into that?
Certainly, without naming organisations before, potentially there's government sources or other councils or and also the potential for overseas research institutes once we get up and running. So yeah, I don't want to put anyone on the spot without them knowing about it. But
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just two quick questions. This is great stuff, but and maybe one here to Tom. We've got a duty under Section 35 of the RMA to gather information, monitor and keep records. And what that quantum is. I want to understand what part of this project is absolutely our core role, which is absolutely fine, and what is above that, because I think that's part of that translation and telling that story. That's my first question. Oh, it's Jason.
I just wonder, section 35, you've got sort of two core roles here. So one is effectively monitoring the state of the environment, which is what the current network seeks to do and has done. You see some patterns that are starting to emerge. You also have a second bit under there, which is assessing plan effectiveness.
Yeah.
So you just have to assess whether or not the rules and provisions in the plan are achieving the outcomes you're seeking. Now, where this fits in that is you have the state component we already do, which is your 600,000 that's in the annual plan. This would enable proactive management moving forward. So what we're talking about here is when you enter a planning cycle for a new plan, you could assess different outcomes. Whereas if you wanted to mitigate the risk without this sort of information, you'd be looking at very restrictive policies that would potentially have negative economic or community-based impacts.
Okay. Look, and I think I missed something in this. So the resolutions today, or the recommendations, talk about us choosing a quantum today. But I'm just wondering whether we're better to be reaching out and having those discussions with the government and other potential funders first, because if you've already said you're going to buy Toyota and actually the community wants something else, or vice versa, don't want to make any analogies to ferries, but you know, isn't it more appropriate we had discussions both with the community and get MFE at least in the first instance before we choose the model?
So I think what we're seeking here was guidance, not resolution in terms of, funding and all that sort of thing. There's other processes for us to work through in terms of long-term plan and all of that sort of stuff. For that, guidance would give us the ability to go and start to talk with confidence with funders around where we might be heading with that program, and also seeking partners, other agencies that might be interested in carrying out certain parts of the broader work program, such that we're pooling resources in that way. But guidance rather than a decision, and guidance on the report outlines the outcomes you receive for those different levels of investment. And so I guess guidance in terms of where the committee sees us heading in terms of outcomes rather than costs at this stage. The cost details we can bring at a later date once we've refined the program, once the TAG have been through that process, and once we've started to engage with those funders in a bit more of a meaningful way.
Thanks, Kate. Kevin? I just wanted to test a couple of things. You really enjoyed reading it, and it's sort of quite eye-opening, and with the fact that the population in that area appears to be on a trajectory to double within the next short period of time. So there's certainly pressures going to come on up there on top of the existing pressures. So with the group that is TAG, has this proposal, what steps actually been signed off by the government representatives on TAG, and what have they done about taking any of these stages to their particular groups?
So the representatives from DOC and MFE are themselves lake scientists, so they're very much bringing a science perspective rather than sort of having other levers to pull at this stage.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So, and again, I just wanted to test a couple of things that you've got in here is is about national importance and national funding. So it says in there that the level of science study, read the lakes, the level of science study and monitoring does not correlate with their national importance. So where can you categorically tell me that these lakes are in fact nationally significant? Or is that an opinion that TAG have got or people have got that because they're important to us, they're important nationally?
Yeah, I think the industry to which operate in that region are huge impact on tourism. And tourism is obviously a big economic driver of the region as well. And so there's a clear indication of the national importance of that. To the ecological value of these lakes is pristine. And so there's a case to look into ways of putting a fence at the top of the cliff rather than the ambulance at the bottom.
Just to add to that, the 3 lakes are classified as nationally significant trout fisheries or sports fisheries, based on the criteria that Fish and Game applies nationally, based on angler usage.
Yep.
And the other thing is, I guess, go into any Tourism New Zealand website and you will see images of those lakes all through it.
And with your indulgence here, that this is not to argue that position, but if we are to endorse any of these programs and then wish to seek funding from other organisations, it would be critical that we've got that same understanding, which I've got the same understanding as you. So that was just that relevance. Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Thanks. One was partially answered before when we talked about the program seeming to be really long term and therefore we need to be precautionary. And then someone spoke then as well about we've actually got one of the highest growth rates in the country happening in the catchment of these, or on the bounds of these lakes. So I guess the question is, does the program bring in the long term? Yeah, we need a long data set, so it's going to take a long time, as well as practically what we could be doing in the short term as well. I know you talked about a little bit about that, Dr. Olsen, but yeah, so is there stuff we could gain from overseas or best practice for, I don't know, stormwater, whatever, the way we do development, knowing that we've got a lot of it happening that we could be doing in the short term as well, because that's important. And then the second question would be around some of the other questions on recommendations here, but we should probably be looking to how we share this report as well. So if someone wants to talk about how we do that, I don't know, we started with a big workshop with a lot of people interested in this subject and we've got to this point. Do we want to be sharing this with the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment and the Ministry for the Environment as well? Thanks.
I can take a partial stab at the first part of that. So a lot of the best practice and or sort of improvement that you'd be seeking there was built into the draft land and water plan. So that would have been where those regulations that might arrest degrading trends or halt nutrient loads from increasing would have been put in place through that process, which is obviously on hold for the time being. And then the second bit, sorry, can you restate the second half of that question? The sharing.
I've got to go to the second one. In terms of sharing, yeah, absolutely. I think it would be appropriate that we mark this milestone with an update to the PCE and potentially other interested parties. There is also intent, I think, for Wanaka to host a symposium later in the year as well that would draw on some of this material.
Thank you. So we've got Andrew, then follow up from Kevin, and then question from Michael, and then Tom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Chair. With the 3 proposals, it seems that the third proposal is like a drop in the bucket, or a couple more drops in the bucket than we currently have got. Is that a fair comment? And I wondered whether it was there simply because it was most palatable from a financial perspective. But is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. It's just perhaps slightly more than what's being done at the moment. Perhaps doing a few targeted studies to try and help understand some of the trends that are being monitored and what the drivers might be of them, but it doesn't really involve any detailed monitoring of the stressors or looking at multiple stressors or anything like that.
Yeah. So because of the scale of these lakes, it seems that to do anything less than 2 wouldn't increase our knowledge enough to be able to actually react to it, to be proactive rather than reactive. Is that, once again, fair enough to say?
I think it's a fair statement. I think in drafting the report, we went to great pains to kind of outline the consequences of making the various different decisions in terms of funding level for regulatory, for informing regulation, but also for certainty for community. So the lower level of investment is probably akin to what a lot of other regional councils are doing currently, but they're similar deep lakes, except that you're in environments where, as was mentioned before, there are quite strong pressures, and those pressures are increasing with the growth within the catchments. That isn't necessarily happening in those other deep water lakes. So yeah, I think within the text that we wrote, we really tried to turn our mind to try and articulate what the consequences of some of the decisions around funding might be. And largely it means that you have to take a more precautionary approach to regulation.
Mr. Chair, can I just follow up with a quick, maybe for Tom? If it was anything more than proposal 3 that we eventually landed on, whatever that might be, it would be likely that it would involve a special consultant procedure and possibly tie in with LTP, etc.
I think any of these would be bringing through an LTP process.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Kevin, you've got a very quick follow-up question there, Michael.
Yeah. Firstly, if the Titanic had all the information in front of it, you wouldn't need to change its course. But so on, this is what you're saying to me here anyway. So I'm just probably to Ben, you make it under financial, you're basically saying, sorry, I've lost the page, under financial, it says any of the 3 proposed monitoring and research proposals, if adopted, will require funding increase to support the work or a reprioritization within existing budgets. Have you a quantum on that piece of work, and what would be probably for you, what would be the best way for us to identify and assist with that reprioritization if we chose that way?
At a basic level, if you were looking at option 3, that would be the entire science budget dedicated to driving lakes programs rather than the rest of our remit. What I think would be appropriate is if we got through this meeting today, moved on to a stage where we're developing detailed programs and talking to funders, we could then come back with an idea of what the likely bill would be for RC, and we can start to talk what that reprioritisation process could look like through LTP.
Right. So if I moved option 1, for the major scale and stop the Titanic going down the wrong track, are you saying the same to me, or is it because this is about developing the work program? Is developing we're not. Yeah, this is not doing. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Listen, first question, guys, don't mean to embarrass you. You're scientists. At the end of the day, you're not policy makers, and you're not financiers, and you're not promoters. So If we were going to choose any of these options today, why on earth would we leave it to a group of scientists to go and identify funding opportunities? I can't imagine that's your specialty of area, is it?
It's not mine.
I think, I think there are parties within the TAG that would give us avenues to speak with the relevant staff within their agencies when it comes to central government funding and all of that sort of thing. The other thing I'd say is we would be looking more broadly than just the group, just the TAG group in terms of future funding opportunities. And I don't think the paper restricts us on that front.
Well, it's a silly motion. Motion 3, it requires the TAG advisory group to identify funding opportunities from external sources. I'm sure those august gentlemen at the end of your table have many skills, but I'm sure that this isn't one of them. So why would you put that onus upon them? That is our job collectively, I would have thought, as a table. Okay, next issue. Can I talk to the TAG group? You've got 3 proposals there. You've sort of summarised them quite nicely on page, my page 18 of the report, 30 of the, there's a summary of proposals 1 to 3, subsection 9. And then you break it into a series of areas in which you'd like to do research on. So there's table 1, which is comparing all the proposals, water budgets, nutrient budgets, food webs, blah, blah, blah. And it goes over, I think, 3 pages. It would be useful to know, because you're giving us an either or, and I don't know that we need to be that silly. You're asking us to choose proposals 1, 2, and 3 when a mix and match wouldn't be a bad way to go, and some proper analysis of what are the options within those. So if you have a look at the table and you see the summary of the various scientific studies proposed, I'm assuming that you're going to cost each of those turn by turn, are you? Is that correct?
Yeah, effectively, that's right. So what we've done here is indicated the level of understanding you could get for the different investment levels. And in proposal 2, and we talked about it, you said it's quite scalable in that we could alter the different components, or we could monitor some lakes but not others, and sort of piece together something. So the idea would be, if we have an indication of the level of investment that you might want to make, then we could go and develop a more full program and have some of those trade-off discussions about, if you include a more full-blown component, what does that do in terms of risk management? If you exclude different components of the research program, what does that do in terms of the knowledge base that you'd be planning on? So the idea is that if we have a more descriptive idea of the investment level, that we can give you basically a framework to have those conversations in about the trade-offs.
I guess the issue I've got here is that I would like that information before I make the decision. Because you're giving us a 1, 2, or 3. Well, no, not you. It's not your fault. It's the way in which the proposals have been put before us today. So we've got to choose 1, 2, or 3 when the mix and match could, in actual fact, occur, and we could work out priorities for that funding in a much more detailed and effective manner. Yeah?
I think the mix and match could occur regardless of the proposal you selected. What we didn't want to do was commit a large amount of resource to developing 3 different full-blown research proposals, which could have taken multiple years. So we've chosen to provide a level of understanding for different investment levels, and you could pick any of the proposals or something in between, and then we could go and cost up a full idea of how that could be filled and have those trade-off conversations.
Yeah, I mean, there's not enough information here to be able to make a considered decision, because we don't know what the funding components are. You also would have heard me at the working group when I chided you for saying this is a serious amount of work for bugger all action. I'm interested in trying to preserve the lakes and possibly to even enhance now. I don't have to wait 10 years until I get the science. And there must be actions that we can take that would preserve the quality of these wonderful lakes, potentially enhance them before we get 10 years of science and have paid for it. So you'd heard me make that decision at the working group. It's still my concern now. Is there anything that you can do in the short or medium term before you have completed this research that would allow us to ensure the quality of the deep water lakes?
So you could put through fairly restrictive policies in a future plan change or a future plan. Some community members would take issue with that, others may not. And the level of challenge you would face could be quite high depending on how restrictive those are. And the more restrictive those were, the more confident we would be that they look after the lakes. And the more permissive they are, the less confident we would be. And that's about as much information as I can provide you on the outcomes under those different scenarios.
So that means that, so under your scenario, it's entirely possible that deep water lakes are degraded over the next 10 years because we're not doing anything and we're waiting for this scientific study to be concluded.
So I think it would be a very pragmatic solution if those were the values to put through planning provisions that hold the line or improve things, but don't necessarily impart costs on the community. And while the science program goes to sort of hold the line or halt through any trends. But if you wanted to claw back, you could also go there.
And just to add to that, it's notwithstanding all of the work of catchment groups and other parties in the lakes catchments at the moment to try and make a change over time. At the moment, we can't quantify what the level of difference or level of change within the lake is for those things, but we certainly know there's been action going on.
I also think it's important just to recognise that we're not talking about a stable baseline here. There is additional growth baked into the system. So even holding the line as it currently stands around land use carries a risk of there being, additional pressure on the lake, and the risk of degradation will increase.
I guess just building off that as well, regional council's got the integrated catchment management program that's sort of developing in the region at the moment as well, which is sort of more focusing on that actions-based approach and understanding what action is happening at a catchment level to address catchment management and subsequently lakes quality as well. So there's a huge opportunity there for the technical advisory group and the integrated catchment management program to learn from each other and stand on each other's shoulders in that respect.
So let me get this right. You're saying that the catchment management group is going to affect policies over the next 10 years, independent of the research, or what?
From my understanding, the integrated catchment management program isn't to do with policy, it's more to do with coordinating actions on the ground.
That's what I thought. So the actions would be then not informed by your science because your science takes 10 years to conclude. Is that right?
The program is a 10-year program, but much of the science will be concluded as we go. So some of the projects will be, started immediately. Others will depend on some of the information that we collect in those projects, and so they'll deliver at a later course.
So we really need a motion that gives us a time level too, don't we? Rather than here as well. So we'd need to know what research you're going to do and what time. And when that research becomes available, that would assist policy making in that area too. So I don't have to wait 10 years before we need to take action. Is that right?
Yeah, I agree with that. There'd be some research being produced within the first few years and so forth and so on till the end of 10 years.
So that would be part of recommendation 2, would it? That's here today.
Yes, and if we're gonna steer on a sort of approximate dollar value, we basically get back to the drawing board and develop a prioritised work program over the next 10 or so years.
So when are you expecting, when are you expecting to come back with the proposal after you've done it? Could you just clarify that for me? So if we were to pass recommendation 2 today, when would you expect the TAG to be able to come back to us with a much more detailed program as to research and funding?
Estimate sort of 4 to 6 months.
So before the end of the year?
I think that would be reasonable. Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, 2 very quick follow-up questions from Tim and Gretchen, please.
Just to clarify, we're being asked to identify an option that will then allow further work to be done. We will actually make a decision as to which proposal.
Yeah.
So given that, the gold standard surely would be that we support the first option. In doing that, would we also be able to gauge what fell out of that for the second option? You know, so proposal 2 would be a subset of proposal 1. So if we commit to 1, you'll be able to provide the information that will give us that other option of 2 as well. Is that how you see it, or are they 2 separate, mutually exclusive exercises?
My understanding of proposal 2 was it was essentially a pared back proposal 1. So it was saying bare bones, if we strip out a lot of the site specific field work driven stuff and replace it with, as far as we can and still be confident in it, with model data and gap filled data based on fewer sites and less real world data, that's what proposal 2 is. And of course you can do that across a large work program like this. There are lots of different avenues of trimming budget here and there. I think the lower end of proposal 2 was basically stripping it back as far as we could keep a straight face and say that we would stand by the findings of it. And then anywhere between that value and the top proposal is sort of on the table. So I think proposal 1 and proposal 2, you could definitely derive a viable proposal 2 if you did full scope of proposal 1, whereas proposal 3 really was just a bit of extra information, a bit of very targeted small scale research or studies to try and fill knowledge gaps and as best we can, just kind of fingers in the dike kind of scenario.
Okay.
And we discussed possibly dropping one of the legs to make it fit proposal 2, that kind of thing. There was some pushback against that.
We've had to have done proposal 1 to work all that out.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks. So quick questions from Gretchen and Lloyd, and then we're going to have to start moving towards a decision.
Yeah, got short space of time. Firstly, a massive thanks then for getting together some of the the best minds probably in lake and freshwater in New Zealand. So that's massive. We're in this time and space then where we've come together, we've got people working together collaboratively. What value will we get from saying yes to proposal 1, where we assess that much versus restricting ourselves to this much, from combining that power now? Are people going to give, an in-kind type? They're going to bring their own work rather than ORC paying for everything here. How does that work? Because that could be an opportunity. Are some of the organisations potentially going to give something to us? Yeah.
Look, I think that TAG has already resulted in some funding coming. So we've embarked on a jointly funded project with MFE recently that would be additive in terms of furthering the objectives of this program. That was in the order of $180,000 worth of funding from MFE. That's happened organically already. But what we intend to do is is once we've got firmer proposals, is to go and have conversations with each of the parties that may have an interest or could have an interest in providing either funding or
I
support.
don't mean the funding, I mean in doing the proposal of what a work program would look like. These guys have got amazing brain power. Will they give some of their brain power to developing the proposal?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. The intent is that the team will continue to develop the program, and some of that's been provided in kind, and some of that is we've provided some funding for, but on the whole, we're getting a very good deal.
Okay, cool, thanks, Lloyd.
Just pretty quickly, from my answers, I think most has been answered. I was just wondering if you scale option 2 up, if it's more one lake and whether it can be transferred to the other lakes, but seemingly it sort of can, but you can't guarantee it. I just on page 38, which because I understand that because it's got numbers and a bit of explanation beside it, and I really understand all the extra monitoring and stuff, but as you go down, there's a lot of stuff like PhD student here, there and everywhere. I think I've counted up 12 or 14 PhD things. Is that around? Is this to find out information we don't currently know? And I was wondering whether we're partnering with the university with PhD and masterate students.
Yeah, so the PhD students were just a way for us to sort of quantify a quantum of work that would be necessary to answer some of these questions. It could be done through a postdoc, it could be done through research assistants or research fellows, but just to try and I guess quantify the amount of work required, we used it as a kind of unit that we thought it would represent the amount of work required to do that. So
in my early days of environment and catchment groups and stuff, I used to have a saying. So I was just wondering if this applies to this project as well. It's if you don't know you've got a problem until you know you've got a problem. Do we not know yet? Have we got a problem, or to what extent it is, or is the first question answered? We just don't deal with it.
I think we know that there are problems. We know there are problems with invasive species. We know there are problems with chlorophyll A doubling in the last 9 years. So we know there's development, all sorts of pressures. There's probably climate change. So we know there's all sorts of things happening. What those mean for the lakes and what those mean for the development around the lakes is the big questions that we don't know, that we're hoping to answer with this research.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, cool, thanks. Alexa, did you have your hand up?
I'd just like to move, really.
Right, okay, so we've got several councillors signalling they are prepared to move a motion.
Want to second?
So how are we going to go about signalling out?
It's got a hand up and
Proposal
wants to
one.
go.
First.
Yeah. Well, Kevin had indicated first, and then Elliot had also indicated that he was.
I didn't realise someone else had already.
I can second that.
Right, so Alexa, you're prepared to move a motion?
Proposal one.
Okay,
So we note, what do we
can you
do?
just turn your microphone?
Oh,
on,
sorry.
please?
Yeah, so proposal one, I'm prepared to move, and my reasons for doing so.
Oh, yeah, so what you are
And-
moving is you are moving that we are one, noting the report,
That's right.
and two, request the technical advisory group to provide a more detailed research and monitoring plan at a funding level aligned with proposal one.
That's correct.
Excellent, thank you very much. Do we have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it.
I'll second
Yeah.
that. Third one too.
Okay, Michael is a seconder. Oh, yeah, motions on the table, we'll open up the debate.
I'll wrap up at the end if you like. Debate.
Who would like to speak?
Oh, then I'll start.
Nice.
You start, Michael.
Yeah, Michael, you go
Yeah.
first.
Because I'm seconded, haven't I?
Yeah.
Cool. Listen, this doesn't commit us to spending any money at all. It commits us to doing more work, which is required. And I think I've indicated through the level of the questions that we need to be much more clear about the costs of and the timing of. And I want to say that to the TAG group. The timing's important. 10 years is a hell of a long time. And you should give some idea to trying to speed that up just quietly. And if that requires a greater research, then give us some indication around that as well. Because we could suffer significant degradation of those lakes before we actually take any policy changes as a consequence of the science. So there's that as well to consider. And I'd like you to address that in the report that you bring back to us before the end of the year. I am reluctant to give you the responsibility of identifying funding opportunities because I don't think that's your realm of expertise. That's something that exists within the ORC and it's our job. But I guess you're not going to be looking at funding opportunities anyhow until we make a policy decision at the end of the year. Listen, these pristine lakes are the jewels in the crown, I think, of Otago's environment. It's critical that we stop any further degradation from that exists. The ORC has not done well in this area in the last. We have moved too late, particularly on invasive species in these areas. Anything that allows us to be more informed is a good thing, but I am impatient for progress. I am impatient we make decisions quicker, and I am impatient for a much more detailed outline of the work proposals that are going to occur. So I will second this motion.
Michael, Elliot?
Yeah, very happy to support the motion. I think just as an aside right off the bat, I think in my experience, scientists spend a lot of their time, far more than any of them want to, looking for grant money and funding sources. So definitely some experience there. I can imagine, but we can always explore funding possibilities at multiple different levels when we get to that stage. There's a big piece of work, but really important one, as we've discussed. I do think the lakes need to be proactively managed, and that targeted proactive management based on good information that we get will mean better outcomes, not just for the health of the lakes, but economically for the local community as well. I think even that $20 million price tag and any further price tags for more proactive management are dwarfed by the economic and social and cultural and aesthetic benefits that those lakes bring. If you were to try and come up with a figure for all of those benefits. So just from a transactional point of view, they won't be as valuable to tourism if they're not as pristine as they are. And so based on that national importance, I think we should be seeking other funding. But let's set this direction today that we do want to take care of these lakes and will invest quite heavily if necessary to fill those big knowledge gaps to do so. So massive thanks to the tag for all the work so far, and looking forward to all the information we get from here on. Cool.
Thank you. Who's next to speak? Bridget, thank you. And then Ellen.
Probably wasn't next, but I'll jump in anyway. Thank you. So I've probably asked in questions what I want to say, but as a member of the working group, along with a number of other agencies, but also Council Forbes and Council Laws, we've been working in this area for a few years. So it's great to have got to this point. It is absolutely fantastic to have these people in the room here today and at the point where they're willing to work with us as a team to draw up detailed programs. Council Laws touched on, is it the place of TAG to go and seek funding? Well, it isn't the place of just ORC, in my opinion. We can't be the only organisation in this space, and actually we can't afford $20 million, but this is extremely important. These lakes, as Councillor Ware has just outlined, are incredibly valued, not just in Otago, but nationally. They bring a huge amount to our country in terms of values Kiwis put on them, also international visitors. We can't have them deteriorating. And other lakes have got huge investment and research programs that have been put into them. Once they've got to the point where they're deteriorated, we don't want to have that happening here. So we can have huge synergies from working together. It's not just all about ORC here. This is a far bigger issue. We need to be working together. So thanks for being in the room with us on that. Thanks for the value that you've brought already and the value that you will bring. We need to get behind proposal 1 at this point. We would be silly to restrict ourselves to doing a detailed work program that's smaller. This is our space and time where we've worked really hard to bring the best people together, and they're willing to continue working in this space, giving their time, often for not free, but for free for us anyway, at the ORC and the ratepayers, in many cases, to help us to present something that will be enduring. We will have on the table what is the work program that's required here, and we should begin behind that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, thank you. Look, this is really important, as we've heard. Wanaka had raised concerns about the health of the lake in 2021. In 2022, the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment wrote to the ORC raising concerns. And at the end of last year, one of our committees received alarming information about what trends in the lakes were looking like. Without better information and better understanding of what's going on, we risk either allowing further degradation or taking an unnecessarily conservative approach. So we need to get that better understanding and information as soon as we possibly can. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Andrew?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think noting the directive in recommendation 2 and 3, there is no other organisation that should be doing that other than the Otago Regional Council. And if you look at what's happened in other research for lakes, whether it's within New Zealand or further afield, it has been the regional authority, the authority that's responsible for the environment, that's led the charge. So this is an appropriate course of action. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
I just turn to paragraph 26 that says any of 3 proposed monitoring and research project proposals that adopted will require funding increase to support the work or reprioritisation of existing budgets. I'll be very interested to see what that means, because at the moment we have a proposal to develop a plan and to develop some parameters around that. We'll also really need to start, it's too late to wait until December to look at funding options or flagging funding options with people, because by the time that is announced, if we do go with proposal A, you'll be wanting a reasonably large sum called $20 million, or maybe more or maybe less, but that's what we're looking at. So we need to start sowing those seeds very soon to make that happen. Comfortable that the scientists have done the work on what those proposals will cost, because they'll know those costs. Again, this is just simply to me showing that what I came in here 5 years ago for was that ORC was well behind the science programs. We're now jumping into a space where we should be. It's just, don't write a check out for $20 million, but let's make sure the costs are taking best advantage to solve a problem that we have got now, and let's not wait till we try and turn a Titanic around later. Let's get one step ahead. So happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Tim.
Yes, I'll support this as well. It's $20 million, but it is over 10 years. And this will feed into our long-term planning and our next long-term planning sessions in a year or two. So at this stage, it's all good for me.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Core part of our work and why we're here. It's a no-brainer. Let's get on with it.
Thank you. I'll just, before I go to you, Alex, I'll just very briefly say from my perspective too, I think I agree. We have a very experienced TAG sitting in place. My experience working with scientists on projects is that lenders, funders want principal scientists in the room. Scientists spend too much time chasing funds as opposed to doing good science. And they want to be able to question and challenge as they're bidding for that work. So I think the a lot of advantage in having a joint approach between the ORC and the key people on the tag. So thank you, Alexa, for a round of applause.
Thanks. There's not much more to be added. I think a lot's been said and everybody seems to be going in the right direction, but there's a few things. First of all, thank you for this report. I want to acknowledge Dr. Mark Schellenberg and also Don Robertson of Wanaka, who as individuals have been raising this flag for decades, not just years, not since 2020, for a long, long time. And actually, yes, they've been giving their time for free. So I want to acknowledge that work. Also to Y Wanaka and many others who've been waving the red flag. And also to this tag group, and a fantastic group. And you've put together a report that is understandable by anybody and it has strong strategic arguments. It explicitly states that research to support proactive management is far more cost effective than reactive remediation. And that is the thing to hold in mind as we spend ratepayer money or search for money elsewhere. This alone makes the proposal one a no-brainer. We can't not afford it. The report makes the case for strategic research that can prevent astronomically expensive restoration efforts. It shows that we've got the scientific capacity, it's sitting right here in front of us, and the capability to put together a plan to start what's going to be a long journey. And we've got to stay committed to that journey towards restoring the health of these Great Lakes. We've got multiple interconnected environmental stresses with long-term consequences for biodiversity, for our economics, for our water quality, for our environmental health, and for how we live among these lakes. So this we can't move forward without evidence, and this is what these people are going to provide for us, is that evidence. We can't get money for anything without evidence. So that is the answer to that scientific problem that you have, Michael, is that we have to have that evidence. The science is essential. What else do I want to say? And we know the lakes are at least nationally significant. They're probably internationally significant. The financial ask is minimal in terms of their mana and our economic, social and environmental reliance on their good health. There is precedent for national funding, and Proposal 1 promises a stitch in time that will save so much more than 9, and we have to make that argument to government and other funders. There's also the opportunity for international collaboration that has much more potential than just restoring our lakes. There's knowledge and economic development that includes restoration, scaling, all sorts of science, of freshwater science from around the world. This is way bigger than us, but we are the kaitiaki. It's our responsibility to do this. We're going to need to get going and pull together the partners needed to make the funding and to bring the heads together to get this underway. The lakes have been degrading for years and we've not prevented this from happening. For those of us who've lived alongside them for decades, the degradation is impossible to ignore. Right now, I can show you, if anybody wants to come and spend some time on Lake Wakatipu, where I have spent 4.5 decades swimming in that water year round, and I can see the silt, I can see the degradation that's happening. But the problem, and we've seen this in the restoration of Lake Taupo, is that people don't understand. They can't see it. The lake looks beautiful and pristine, but it in fact was quite sick. We are in that situation now too. So to not commit to this highest level of funding we can to protect what's likely our greatest environmental asset is something we could greatly regret. So I thank you for voting to get going on this with a pretty paltry sum, but we have to start somewhere. And thank you, team, for your work.
Right, thank you. We've all spoken. I'm going to put it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Is there anybody against? No, the motion is carried. Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone. And thank you for your valuable work. Yes. Right, we will move on to our next paper. I am about 10 minutes over the time for that one.
Thank you very much.
So annual air quality report, paper 9.2.
I'd just like to introduce Sarah Harrison, who's our air quality scientist at OSC.
Right, thank you. So I will take it as read. Is there anything you want to highlight in here before we move to some questions?
Yeah, I just had a few things to say, if that's all right. This is the annual air quality report for 2024. OSC has a monitoring network for particulate matter PM10 and PM2.5. And this report is a snapshot of last year's data discussing how these sites compare to each other and the number of exceedances that we had in Otago. Every year we're adding a new pollutant or site into our network. And last year, the latest addition was PM2.5 being monitored in Mosgiel. So 2024 recorded 28 exceedances of the national environmental standards for PM10. And as we know from previous years, our PM10 concentrations are very low in summer, but very high in winter. And as we add new instruments to our network, we're finding that the same is true for PM2.5 as well. And I just want to thank the environmental monitoring team for maintaining and upgrading our network to ensure that we continue to get high quality data. So any questions?
Great, thank you. So it's just noting this is our annual report we present through the year. We'll open up for questions.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Gary, and thank you for the report, Sarah, and all. Look, I'm aware that there are some community groups doing their own air monitoring. Kaipara Valley, for example, is distributing those monitors through Kaipara Valley and perhaps beyond as well. Wondered, is that likely to be useful information for us, or are there going to be problems with that calibration and the standard of monitoring and things?
Yeah, that's interesting. The types of instruments that they use tend to be low cost sensors, and the value of them is that you can get a lot of them out into different areas for a very low cost. I think the spatial aspect, comparing different sites to each other, will be really interesting with that kind of data. So it's not data that we can use to compare to environmental standards or anything like that, but it is still valuable as comparison data, and we're also helping communities be involved in collecting data and learning more about air quality.
So with the agreement of groups such as that, is that something that may be able to be brought into future reports?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I have access to their data, and so I'm interested in finding out what kind of things might be, what features the data might be showing us.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Michael.
Sorry. Listen, yes, can I take you to table 2, please? So those are the Ministry of Environment and Environmental Performance Indicators, yeah. So let's just take the most extreme one that says action. How do I read that against the table 3 that you've provided me and table 4, please? So that's table 2, and I'd like to know how that fits in with table 3 and table 4. One of those is PM10 and one of them's PM2.5.
So the environmental monitoring indicators from NFE, they can be applied to any pollutant, and they are with reference to the guideline for that pollutant or to the limit. So in this case for PM10, the action limit is 50 micrograms per cubic meter. So that's how many exceedances we record. We do not have a similar thing for PM2.5 because we're not comparing our data to any guidelines. So the way you can view it is probably best done on figure 3, where for the 4 PM10 sites, we have the data graphed as either good, acceptable, alert, or action. And the action ones you can see are the sort of top percentages at Alexandra Arrowtown in particular. They're sort of around 5% of the days that are monitored in the action category.
So table 3 then means that I need to go to the one that says number of NESAC exceedances. Is that correct?
That's right.
And on those days, that red action would be there. Yeah?
Yes.
Is that the correlation? Right. But you can't do it on table 4 because there isn't one. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, that's right.
That's unfortunate. Why isn't there one?
There's a couple reasons. Firstly, we don't have a NESAC limit for PM 2.5. So we could, in theory, compare these to the WHO guideline instead. However, the way that we're monitoring our data, we still need a bit of QA/QC done on it. And what that means is we just need to compare our instruments with a known instrument for at least a year. Because a lot of these newer instruments that we're installing need correction factors on the data. So the data I've reported is a best guess based on correction factors that other people have developed. And so what that means is that in future, when we have our own correction factors, we can apply that to the data, and we can do all these analyses just after we've done that. If that makes sense. So yeah, we can do that, but
it's just that, isn't it 2.5 the one that's more dangerous and therefore more likely to be injurious to health?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, if that's the case, and are you saying that there are no national PM 2.5 indicators?
Yes.
What an enormous flaw, isn't it? Because at that stage, if there are no national guidelines on this, are we expecting the government to provide us any?
At the moment, it's we're not sure what the government's doing with those. They've just been indefinitely delayed for the last few years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
If I was to summarise your report, would it be fair to say that wood burners are causing air pollution, and particularly in Alexandra and Mosgiel and Arrowtown?
Yes. Yeah, that is the main source of air pollution in most of our towns.
So what can we do about that?
Well, they're working on the air plan and the air strategy at the moment, and they are introducing policies and also non-regulatory measures to be considered for adoption. And yeah, the best way from what we've found from other councils and other regions who've done this work is that you need to do regulatory work and non-regulatory work at the same time. So you need to provide other alternatives for people to heat their homes.
Right, any other questions? So if not, it's a noting report. Roy, you're going to move.
I'm happy to move.
You're happy to move. Is there a seconder? Alan, thank you. Any debate? Any discussion? Okay, we'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? It's carried. Thank you. Just make sure. Okay, we move to 9.3, on regional Indigenous biodiversity monitoring.
He's getting the words.
Get your overalls off. Hey, get your overalls off.
I do get dressed up now and again.
Got Pete joining Ben. Welcome, Pete.
My pleasure.
I'll just introduce the paper.
I'll just introduce Pete Ravenscroft. He's our team leader of biodiversity within the science team.
Excellent. Thank you. Pete, will you just do a brief introduction?
Well, I can
for
do,
us?
yes. Yep. Look, thanks for the opportunity to present today. It's actually a relatively short paper. The biodiversity team is relatively small and compared to other teams, and it's charged with the delivery of science biodiversity program. The program includes freshwater, coastal, marine, terrestrial, and within the freshwater, it's sort of broken down into fish, eco-hydrology type space, and including wetlands and ICES, which is an intermittently closed estuary. To date, monitoring probably plays a pretty minor role in our overall work program. The program sort of is still at the stage of inventory, mapping. We're still in the development stage of monitoring methodologies. And also a lot of our efforts gone into supporting and delivering on a number of statutory plans and such as the LWRP, the RPS, and obviously we've had a reasonable involvement in the recent draft of the biodiversity strategy. As mentioned, the paper is relatively short. The biodiversity program is relatively new, but we also plan on coming back in a couple of months' time where we will deliver the biodiversity or science biodiversity program as a whole, and it'll be a much larger document, give you an indication of where we've come from, where we're heading, and some of the results. As mentioned, we've also been pretty well consumed by most of the science stuff around the LWRP, where two of our members were completely consumed. One was seconded to policy to support the policies during that process. Another one also does all the modelling for the land and water plan as well. So we've been a wee bit short in that space. No excuses, but that sort of gives you an indication of why we're sort of a wee bit behind where we should be, in my view. So most people ask us why, what, and where do we monitor? And I think it really comes down to the questions that we're trying to answer. Okay, so sometimes we're trying to deliver programs for specific management purposes, and I'll highlight the long draw monitoring program where we actually come a couple of months ago and presented to you around the interaction between surface and groundwater. And a lot of it is also looking at the likes of supporting land and water plan. We sort of do the development of the minimum flow stuff. So we look at the ecology, we develop the studies, and then we implement them. So we actually have, for we team, we're actually quite significant. We're also in the terrestrial space, where Scott Jarvie has come here multiple times presented to you. And he's here later on today, and obviously Sam Thomas and Sammy Khan. So Sam Thomas will be presenting later today, so I won't go too much into the history sort of conversation. I've got the expert in the room, so to speak, so it's a wee bit beyond me. But also, I think what we understand too is we're just in the process of developing a new biodiversity strategy. Sorry. I've got my hearing aids and the Bluetooth in my phone, and I'm just getting a phone call. So I tried to turn my phone off, but for some other reason it was beyond me.
It's not race 6, horse 3, is
no,
it?
No, but there's one of the, well, it's an advantage of having hearing aids, but it's also a disadvantage in appropriate times. But now now that it's stopped ringing, I can actually carry on talking. Look, the biodiversity strategy actually has a very interesting paragraph in it when it says we will continue to develop a comprehensive and up-to-date knowledge base of what Indigenous. Oh, sorry, yeah, the message just came through my phone. Yeah. Right, I'm back on track now. Sorry about this. It's been embarrassing, really, but that's part of getting old, sadly. Well, my phone's just pinging away here. Hang on. Right, now I can hardly hear, but at least I can hear. Sorry, this is getting a wee bit more than this. Embarrassing. But look, basically it goes on. I'll start it again. We'll continue to develop a comprehensive and up-to-date knowledge base of what Indigenous biodiversity exists in Otago, where it's located, how it's doing, and why it's in its current state, and the methods and actions that can support its maintenance. Now that to me is a key part of our job and how we can link it into it in the biodiversity team. So we will take this strategy once it's landed, we'll develop methods, we'll develop where we should be going, and then we'll start the monitoring. So basically it's looking at the current state. If we put an action in place that we'll try to recommend, this is the results. There's another part, although we're talking about a lot of the statutory side of things, I think one of the major things that, in my view, that biodiversity does create is there's that development of relationships within the community. Everybody likes biodiversity. And I could just think, I was talking to the team just before I come on, each of our team members are dealing with either 5 or 6 different catchment groups. And I think the MCG is one where with that development of that relationship is really, really pivotal. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to agree with the final outcome, but it does mean we can actually have a more an open, honest conversation. And I don't think that type of relationship building can be undervalued. And biodiversity is a really nice segue into that conversation. Right, I won't go into the individual programs. They all sort of deliver slightly different deliverables. Like some are linking into the MPS-FM, some are supporting the LWRP, some are delivering the RPS, some are doing the MPS-IB. Now we've got the biodiversity strategy as well. And when I look at our wetlands one, the Skull Plain is a classic example of what our biodiversity team is doing. And basically we looked at wetland health, so we've done the mapping, so we know where they are. We're looking at extent. Another thing that we're also looking into up there is the relationship between flows, inundation of the wetlands, the frequency and the duration of these flows. So that will then tie back into a potential plan change in the future. So I'll stop there. I'll put my hearing aid back in so I can hear what you say.
That's great, thanks, Pete.
And we'll just ring you, Pete.
Do you have my phone number?
Anyone got any questions for Pete and any of his callers? Yeah.
Yeah, Pete, just you mentioned earlier about your developing monitoring methodology. So is that not available somewhere else in the country where things happen that we could just not tap into that?
There is opportunities for much of our work, but some of our rare ecosystems or our endemic species, not so.
Right.
So we're looking at developing them ourselves for that. But there's only a handful of those. It's not like we have to develop a methodology for every single program that we run. Like all the freshwater stuff for the fish, there's a standard protocol that we do. So, yeah.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Any other questions?
We've got the time as on the, well, first of all, on the kelp forest monitoring, mentioned a board coming at year 5. I was just wondering what sort of timeframe we're looking at for getting that.
I'll check with them. How far are we back from that?
The full report.
Yeah, that comprehensive end. When is that end?
Financial year.
Next financial year, cool. And then for the wetland monitoring from that, like paragraph 37 onwards, sounds like a lot of work has been directed into mostly the mapping stuff. And so I guess the question is, I think the legislation has recently changed or about to change. Did we already finish all the mapping before that happened? And if not, what happens there? And then also, what does that mean for monitoring now that we maybe have more time?
My understanding is, yeah, it's just a time frame around that I think they're changing mainly. We're well and truly through our program. We will continue while it's just at the same speed and finalise that piece of work. We're probably, 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the way through the target region already. It would be a wee bit foolish now to stop that piece of work and then pick it up later. We're just, at this stage, we're planning to continue it into the next year and the following year just to complete the task.
Thank you. Any other questions? No?
Well, I'm hoping the serious questions are over. Pete, I like the photos in your report. And the one that really stands out is the Galaxid with the little tag on it. How on earth can you get such a small tag on such a small fish?
Experience. So a lot of that tagging that you see in those fish, they were tagged when I worked for the Department of Conservation. So the only real tagging we've done since we've been a regional council was the stuff that we just started with Lloyd's team down in the Pomahaka. But basically, there's a needle, you put the tag up the needle, you slip it under the skin, and you push a plunger and the tag will come out. There's a little bit, it's a feel job rather than a visual job. Because obviously you don't want to skewer the fish. It's just, so the early days, I won't go into too much, but there was a few fatalities in the very early first year. But now, what does it take? 5 seconds, 2 seconds? The biggest thing is actually about loading the gun up, putting the tag in the gun is more difficult than putting the tag in the fish.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Lloyd, you got a quick question?
Oh, just a quick comment. I can vouch that it's like poetry in motion. You've got a guy that's got visually impaired and it's raining and he can't hear the fish screaming. But no, it was really awesome seeing it being done, and it's obviously Pete's done before. So
All right, thank you. Andrew, are you linking because you're on?
No, I had a sore eye.
Question? Right. I'm happy to, it's a noting report. I'm happy to move.
Sorry.
Oh, you've got a question?
Yeah, sorry, and I'm sorry, apologies for being late and coming into this report. The wetlands definitions, so this clarification, just made a comment that you thought the change in legislation will be more about timeframes rather than definitions, if I got that correct?
Yeah, well, there is definitions in there that's changed, but I'm not, to be honest, it was the timeframe that I used rather than getting across the definitions, but they will change.
Yeah, okay, and I just presume as you go through the work, and I think I may know the answer, but I'm just checking. When you've done the work on definitions, even if that is defining and mapping the areas, even if the criteria change, you've done enough detail that you can change those.
Yes, yeah.
With that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why it works.
Yeah, that is one of the problems when you actually have a change of rules and regulations, other bits and pieces pushing us slightly differently. You start a big piece of work like this, and then there's a change. Yeah, there's always potential for hiccups.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. If we're all done with questions, I'm happy to move that we note the report. So Alexia, you're going to second it? Okay, great. No other discussion. We've got it. All in favour? Against? It's carried. Thanks very much.
And my apologies about me hearing aids.
Totally fine. What was that, Pete?
Nice light moment.
I can hear you now.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we will move to 9.4. As we will monitoring update.
Oh, but that's a question. Of course, there's a different screw rules. Some special one for there.
Right, I'd just like to introduce Dr. Eric Button to my right and Mark Crawford, who are our land and soil scientists in the science team. And I'll let them take it away.
Great, thanks very much. Go for it.
Good afternoon. I'll just give a brief introduction to the paper. So I'm very excited to share an update to the Land and Soil work program. This work stream has been added to the science team since about 2021, so it's relatively new, but we're working hard to develop the program, to innovate, to leverage funding outside of the ORC, collaborate nationally, and just add as much value to the program as we possibly can. I'll just quickly, and that also reflects how varied this paper is, all the different work streams that we're across. And I'll just briefly summarize 3 of those areas, just so you can get a better understanding of why we're doing them. So the first is land use mapping. This is an area we've invested in, and it's primarily to assist in implementing national policies such as Indigenous biodiversity, highly productive land, and freshwater management. And this is quite key in managing the region's natural resources. Then around the soil health monitoring, so this is a state of the environment program. So it's an obligation under the RMA Section 35. And this is to develop a long-term data set to support both sustainable practices within the community, but also potential policy drivers as well. And then finally, just a sort of broader subject is various projects that we have underway, and they vary quite broadly in their scope, but in general, we're looking to support sustainable management of soil and land resources, and provide data, options to landowners, and valuable data for the council itself to manage, regulate, and engage the community where we can. And just as you're thinking of some questions, I've brought 2 3D models, which is part of what I've added in the paper. And this is just to give you an idea of this innovative tool that we've harnessed. So I've got here the Wanaka Township, the same area in both, using 2 different data sets. So this one is using the national elevation data derived from the topographic map. And then this is using LiDAR data, which is flown. And we're one of the few regions where we don't have national coverage. So I'll pass these around, and it just gives you an indication of the value of this kind of data. And it's just an example of what you can do with this technology to communicate. And yeah, so this, for example, shows the lake and old glacial moraines and earthworks you might be able to spot from development and old channels from where the lake would have flown and the old outflows would have been. So I'll just pass these around, and very happy to take any questions.
Right, thanks very much. Open for questions. Okay.
Just wondering about that data sharing agreement with NIWA, is that so if that's a new thing, is that comparable to the other regional councils have similar agreements, or we compare with other councils on that?
Yeah. So I think currently there are 11 other regional councils that have signed that agreement. So it is something they have been pushing, and are very supportive of it being taken up by others. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Any other questions? Questions, everyone happy?
Yeah.
Okay, right. We are a noting report. Kevin.
Just on exactly what Ben's reflected on as well. We're doing work with, and it's really good to see the collaboration between Ag Research, ECAN, and ORC on programs. So, could we not just leave that to Ag Research and the figures would be available anyway, or have we prompted Ag Research to do that?
In answer to your question, we prompted Ag Research to do that, and it was on our basis of including ECAN because they represent soils which we have in the Waitaki. So rather than us taking on bearing all the I guess the cost and the resource we've shared, and so Ag Research were able to leverage, and therefore we're now in collaboration with ECAN.
Yeah, and so they'll be working that successfully. They'll be available for other projects of similar nature, I presume.
It's establishing a relationship, and Eric might like to also comment on establishing a relationship between ECAN, Environment South, and Otago. Do you want to just we are going to leverage that, Eric?
Yeah, there's areas that we're operating in that didn't make the cut for this paper, but one example is we've recently established a forum between the 3 councils in the land and soil science area, and recently had the first meeting, and the whole concept of this forum is to take advantage of opportunities where we can collaborate or we can knowledge share, and just learn from each other and maximize efficiency in the work we do.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, we are a noting report.
Happy to move.
Happy to move seconded. Kevin and Kate. Any discussion? Okay, I'll put it, all right, Alec, go for it.
Me too, but I was just gonna, I meant to ask a question on the last paper about how we're bringing the data. Will, I'm putting a lot of effort into getting, how we're bringing that into the community, so how we might bring it in better. So just really great to hear about further in the paper some of those efforts to bring that data into the community. And you touched on that a bit, and I think obviously a visual component is helpful in doing that. Props are always fun, but even the more potentially, I wouldn't say boring, but less aesthetic parts of the information are really important to bring to the community. That land use data and stuff can be really empowering and helping communities shape their own futures and stuff. So really cool stuff that we're doing. Cool.
Thank you.
I'd like to reinforce.
Alexa.
I'd like to reinforce that too. It's really, really good information. It's really easy to understand. Things like where soils are compacted or where soils are missing something or depleted. And I think that's really useful. A lot of these papers that are here and other ones that we're receiving at the moment are really feeding into those the integrated catchment management groups. It can give them this work's going to empower communities and that work. So thank you for that.
Okay, great, thank you. No other discussion. I'm going to put it, all in favour? Aye. Against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks very much, gentlemen. Great stuff. Right. At 2:45, we have a fire alarm test today. We don't need to evacuate the building. We're just going to stay put and burn.
Just to be clear, if that alarm keeps going, we're leaving.
Out we go.
Red fire engines out
Well,
there.
they believe it.
Yeah. There we go.
We'll have a division on that one.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to paper 9.5, coast and estuaries monitoring programs.
This is Dr. Sam Thomas, who's our coastal scientist, to present the paper today. So.
Right, welcome, thanks. Sam?
Okay, cool. I'll give a quick overview. So it's sort of two parts to this. There's the estuary program summary. So that's brief. That's on the sedimentation part of the estuary SOE program. So it's just two indicators of the wider suite of indicators to show estuarine health. And couple of key points in it is that in terms of the sediment plate and annual sedimentation rate, 5 years is the minimum required to get a trend on that, and only 3 of our estuaries have 7 years monitoring and above 5, so we're in the early stage of the program. Another thing to note is that this will form, the coast plan is currently under review, and part of that will be a estuary state of the environment report. All going well, on track for end of calendar year. Start of the next year, we'll be pulling together this information plus all the other suite of indicators we monitor to provide a more comprehensive picture of the state of estuaries in Otago and the risks in the catchment to help inform the coastal plan. And the other part of this report is highlighting where the one part of the coastal program. So previously we met in 2022, I think from memory, was we mapped the marine significant ecological areas off the coast, and since then we're looking at ground truthing some of them. So we focus on biogenic habitat, which is essentially like sponge gardens, shellfish beds, that kind of thing, because depending on what management class, there's good data, like for example the demersal fish is really good data because it was all from trawl fisheries and fisheries NZ, so pretty reliable. But other data could range from Bob seeing a penguin out there to actual university research data. So we're focused in on the biogenic habitat, as that's kind of something we can actually have sway over as well. So for the last 2 financial years we've been out there putting tow cameras down as much as we can to look at what's there. This data will then be used to inform the coast plan and help actually inform where our marine significant ecological areas are, because some of the MAT might not actually exist, or they might not be significant anymore because they've been destroyed through trawling or other methods.
Yes, that's a brief summary of the two parts to the report. So happy for any questions.
Great, thank you. So yes, we will be noting the report and also be noting those next steps that are underway. So questions? Okay.
Just wanted to check, for the coastal monitoring, does that go out to the full 22.2
nautical miles?
Coastal miles.
Yeah.
That are within our remit, basically. And then in the context of estuaries, talk about implications for management, based on this data, and I'm just wondering what management looks like, in the context of those estuaries. Is that just sort of implementation of the coastal plan that we're working towards, or are there other potential things that this data will be informing?
Well, it sort of crosses plans a bit, and so it all kind of came directly around, I suppose, management of the coast plan through things like salt marsh directly within the coastal environment, but equally the sedimentation and other indicators could highlight things in the land and water plan in terms of linking it with that of how we need to manage upstream effects on the estuaries. Is probably, to be honest, the main impact is coming from upstream. So looking into how to manage on land.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Questions? Tom?
Just in regards to the coastal plan, what is the timetable for actually kicking that off and getting it underway?
I'll just speak really loudly. So I only have a green light, not a red light. So the staff are working on the initial stages of that review now. So section 35, which Councillor Wilson mentioned earlier, efficiency and effectiveness review as it stands, and then the current timeline is notification 27/28. All of that is contingent on hiring reform, but that work still needs to happen regardless of what form the plan looks or takes in the future.
Cool, thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. You mentioned in your introduction that there were the 3 sites that had been monitored for a period of time, maybe back 2005 or.
They're ones over 7 years. Yeah.
So which 3 are those of the 11?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. The Catlins River estuary, the Shag River estuary, and Waikowhiti estuary.
Right. So the data on those 3 obviously is fuller, and you've got a baseline with those 3, and with reference to those 3 and the way they're tracking, you able to share anything? I couldn't find that in the report. I'm sure it's there.
Yeah.
But I'm just interested just to know just how those 3 in particular are tracking, that we've got detailed information or the greater information.
So the Catlins estuary is kind of relatively straight. Well, in terms of just the sedimentation, I suppose, speaking to this report, lower estuary is relatively good condition in sedimentation, and the upper estuary is tracking in the wrong direction in terms of increasing sedimentation rate and mud content, which both are, well, the sedimentation rate's not as linked to ecological outcomes. The mud content is the big one currently linked. There's a separate national review of the actual sedimentation rate and how it links, but so the upper estuary is not in a great condition on sediment. In the Waikowhiti, generally all 3 sites, the kind of the Meriton sidearm is slightly elevated, but still relatively good condition, and the rest of the estuary under the monitoring. And in terms of our sites, based on this, is good. And the Shag River, it has higher than what we'd like in terms of mud content in the Shag River. And in terms of transit sediment, like 5 years is the minimum, 10 years as a paper based on colleagues from Waikato would be better to understand, because it just, as you can imagine, erosion deposition every year. Some years it's been quite high and then it kind of disappears, but the mud content has increased, so not ideal.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Are all done with questions? Oh, okay, sorry.
So if I was looking at the report from SALT, if you, and I'm interested in this one on the Pleasant River, Te Hakapupu, First of all, the photo of the person in what looked like upfilled waste and sediment. I presume I'm missing that photo because that looks really scary. That's on page 14.
Yeah.
But if I just want to check that I'm reading this map correctly, because I think that's the graph. As long as you're below the black dotted line, is that considered okay on the graph on page 14?
Oh, the graph. So that's just the dash line shows sediment accumulated, the national guidelines. Yeah, above that, but it's sort of changing from baseline. So
yeah,
that's the Pleasant River is not too bad in terms of sedimentation rate, but again, there's 3 years of data, so it's a bit because you can literally have a flood and you'll see the sediment and you can walk down there and see it, and within 3 or 4 months you wouldn't know it's there, but it's the mud content, which in that table 6 beside is 52% in site A, and in the last monitoring and 40. So rough as a general rule, without getting too into the nerdy part of it, the 25% is roughly when you start losing community in terms of biodiversity. Functioning's lower.
So the baseline graph is, I mean, it's short term, so it's, I understand that doesn't give a huge trend, but it's that last year. And so what you're saying is that when the site was monitored, it may have just been an event that made that look far worse. Because that last year doesn't look good for all the investment of time.
In Pleasant River?
Yeah. It's site A, or am I misreading that?
Yeah, no, site A is close to the 2 millimeters. Yeah, that dashed line's the 2 millimeters. Yes, that's roughly good. So
yeah, but the actual increase in that last year has been really high.
Yeah, and like the year before was lower, so it's not too. It's 2 millimeters a year around that is not anything to be worried about too much.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it'd be nice to get more data to see what's happening, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool.
So, sorry, that just referring to the work with monitoring levels and that on the Kakanui at the moment, where does that feature in the program? It doesn't feature in this here, but the Kakanui estuary, where does that feature in the overall program of things?
So the Kakanui estuary will be as part of the State of the Environment Report for all estuaries. Why it doesn't feature in this is because just the nature of the estuary doesn't allow for like sediment mud content, like monitoring, just because it's predominantly gravelly. I mean, there is muddy content, but just because it's a tidal river estuary, I suppose these are all shallow, intertidally dominated estuaries, so kind of sand flats, mud flats. So it's a different monitoring methods for that type of estuary.
But you'll be still checking for inundation of sediment or
yeah. So that's sort of done more off boat and kind of like one-off samples in terms of looking down rather than like an annual plate going out there, because it's completely different system.
Thank you.
Okay, cool, thanks for that. So we're all done with questions.
Happy to move.
Given you're moving, both recommendations.
Yes.
Andrew, you're seconding. Any discussion? Put it all in favour? Aye. Against? It's carried, thank you. Right, we are moving on to 9.6. Fire alarm must be silent.
It's not working.
No.
Yes,
Type localities of terrestrial animals, plants and fungi in the Otago region.
Give it the sniff test. No, it's not smoke.
Yes, so Ben, and I think you've got Scott online for this one.
Yeah, it's welcome Dr. Scott Jarvie, who's zooming in from Auckland to present the next two papers.
Right, okay, welcome Scott, and we'll just pass over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to present. So this noting paper provides an overview of a report on the type localities of mainly terrestrial species found in Otago. As described in the paper and the report, when a new species is described, the name is permanently linked to a single type specimen, the holotype, and to the location from which the specimen was collected, the type locality. Such type localities are important for taxonomy and conservation, with their type specimens treated as the crown jewels in many herbaria, fungaria, and museums. From a conservation perspective, the type localities becomes an important asset for two main reasons. First, it represents a set of environment conditions where the species naturally occurs and could be one of only a few known locations. Knowing these locations is important for obtaining future information on the species, for example, around genetics, abundance, and traits. Second, the type locality may represent the environmental conditions where the species once occurred but no longer does. Many type localities will also have undergone significant environmental change, and the indigenous species may no longer be present. Many species in Aotearoa, New Zealand, have not been fully assessed for their risk of extinction. So in the accompanying report, a total of 1,453 type specimens were collated for Otago, representing 1,161 species. Around a third of the type localities for plants and fungi have associated bounding box uncertainties, while all the terrestrial arthropods have them. Why are we doing this? Councils are required to protect areas with significant native biodiversity under the Resource Management Act. An attribute used for designation of significant natural areas by councils is the presence of a type localities of an indigenous species. Type localities were also included as a criterion for designation of SNAs under the NPSIB, the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, when gazetted, and have been included in the ORC's Regional Policy Statement. The identification of type localities in this report is informative, but their use will depend on outcomes of the pause on the identification of SNAs by territorial authorities as being informed by government, and that pause is from 3 years as of October last year. Why the value? So as mentioned earlier, from a conservation perspective, the type locality is important because it could only be one of a few known locations. Because many of these species have not been fully assessed for their risk of extinction, i.e. been given a data deficient status, or have not been assessed at all, they cannot be given a threat status. And why does the ORC's responsibilities? As mentioned, to inform biodiversity management. One of them will be through the protection of biodiversity if type localities are to be included as a criterion in the NPSIB and RPS. And two, to highlight areas for future surveys of species in the regions, especially those that have type localities have been assessed as data deficient. For example, 23 indigenous vascular plant species have been assessed as regionally data deficient with type localities in Otago. And such surveys at these locations could help us to establish the threat status of these species if they were located. Any questions?
Great, thanks very much. Yes, we'll throw open questions. Okay.
I'm just interested about the locations that you've used and how specific some of those locations are and the risk to those species, because you have been quite specific. Is that not a risk for those?
Not for the species listed, and I haven't been that specific in them.
Okay.
For the vulnerable ones that are sensitive to poaching.
Okay, and there's a reference here to Haast Pass. Is that within the Otago?
It is. Yep, right on the border it is.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if that was. And the only other one is Deep Stream, Old Duntroon Road. I'm just wondering if that's Dunstan Road.
I'll check on that. Yep, thanks for pointing it out.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions? Elliot.
Yeah, just like final paragraph, I think it was 33, around the national initiatives to digitize specimens and contribute to GBIF, and just wondering what ORC's role is in those efforts, both what our role has been and is currently, and what you think it could be.
Yep, thanks, Elliot. So ORC has championed 2 EnviroLink reports into space. The first one was an EnviroLink is a funding scheme administered by the Ministry for Business Innovation and Employment. And it's for the environmental transfer of knowledge from Crown Research Institutes, universities, and some not-for-profit organisations to councils who often don't have the expertise to do it. The first EnviroLink was an advice grant that worked out how many type localities could be assessed under the NPSIP for that designation criteria of type localities. That report was finished and is available on the EnviroLink website. They also point out what type localities that they would prioritise, and that were things like, let's do the plants first, not do records from before 1940, and deprioritise highly mobile fauna and marine species. The second piece of work was also an EnviroLink advice grant championed by the ORC, investigating the use of the Global Biodiversity Information System, or GBIF. And that's a repository that collates biodiversity and biosecurity occurrence records. And it could be species, it could be habitats, it could be ecosystems. This report investigated the adoption by regional councils of GBIF to inform biodiversity and biosecurity manager. It was recommended that pilots should happen. MFE have picked up on that pilot and have funded 5 regional councils, including New Zealand, to investigate whether the data that we collect can marry to the underlying infrastructure of GBIF, and it showed that it could. MFE is going to continue investigating how to continue to promote the use of GBIF by regional councils, and OSE will likely support that. Hopefully that answers your 2 questions.
Cool. Thanks, Scott.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just following on that, we're planning to bring a paper about the environment program and ORC's interaction with it later in the year, describing what it is and the work we've had done through that. And just like to correct that I'm listed as the author of this paper on the covering report. It's definitely all Scott, so just want to make sure Scott gets the recognition.
Definitely. No, thanks for that. Thanks, Scott. Right.
Happy to move.
Happy to move. Andrew Noon, thank you. Elliot, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, no, we'll put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thanks very much. Right, moving on to 9.7, regionally endemic species in Otago. And we have Scott again.
Once again.
Yep, go for it, Scott.
Okay. Once again, thanks for the opportunity to talk about this noting paper and how it provides an overview on a report on that's just come out by the ORC. So to reiterate from the noting paper and the report, a species is considered endemic if it is native to and only found in a specific geographic location, and that means breeding and nowhere else in the world. New Zealand has a high proportion of endemic species, one of the highest totals worldwide. For example, 100% of our bats and reptiles are endemic and 80% of our vascular plants. For the purpose of the accompanying report, a species was defined as being a regional endemic if it is native to and only found breeding in Otago. In this report, a total of 360 species were identified as endemic to the Otago regions. The most numerous species groups was invertebrates, followed by vascular plants, followed by freshwater fish, followed by reptiles, bryophytes, and then birds. Of the species assessed, about 80% of them had heightened risk of extinction. That means that they're in the threatened, at-risk, or data deficient threat classification, as according to the New Zealand Threat Classification System that's administered by Te Papa Arowhai Department of Conservation. So why are we doing this? Well, to identify what species are in Otago, and of these species, those that only occur naturally in the region. For example, how does the council know what to manage if we don't know what's here or what is unique to the region? Another reason is to inform biodiversity management in Otago. This includes through our biodiversity strategy, because emphasis is being placed on our regionally endemic species and ecosystem. Through our contestable grants through the Eco Fund, because additional weighting is being applied for species that are threatened regional endemics. Through the Otago Biodiversity Forum, where knowledge is shared with mana whenua, territorial authorities and other stakeholders, and to raise awareness and celebrate our regional endemics, often through our website and social media. And why does it overseas responsibility? It's under the Resource Management Act. Biodiversity protection has been an outcome sought by the RMA since its enactment in 1991. However, since 2003, the establishment of objectives, policies and methods to maintain Indigenous biodiversity has been a mandatory function of regional and district councils. This is mostly under Section 6C and Section 30 of the RMA. There are some other powers that come to council, and that's mainly under the Local Government Act and the Biosecurity Act. And that would also be around how to be engaged proactively in management intervention, since it is known that declining biodiversity will not be arrested by reactive measures only, and by collaborating, coordinating with others. Any questions?
Okay, great, thanks for that. Yes, we have questions. So well introduced, now everyone's silent. Okay, if we're all good with questions, you've done a very good job there, Scott. Someone happy to move?
Yep.
Alexa, thank you. Elliot seconding, thank you. Any discussion? All right, we'll put it all in favour.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. Mainly, thanks, Scott, again, for another superb paper. But as I was talking earlier today, it's just so important to have these records in place. You know, we don't exactly know everything we're going to do with them or what's going to happen, but to have these stakes in the ground is really important, and it's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. Okay, we're all good. I'm going to put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks very much for that, Scott. What we might do now is break for 10 or 15 minutes, grab a cup of coffee.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy with that?
Second.
Right, where'd you? Lloyd moves, given seconded.
Aye.
All in favour?
Division.
Carried. Thank you.
Is everybody here as Kate?
I think she left.
Oh, she's gone. Okay, right. Okay, thanks everyone. We'll get back underway. So we are now on item 9.8, recreational water quality annual report. One of the reporting scorecards annually. Ben, you can introduce, please.
Yeah, just like to welcome Helen Trotter, who's our water quality scientist.
The Recreational Water Quality Monitoring Program and Response Protocols are implemented annually in accordance with the Ministry for the Environment and Ministry of Health National Microbiological Water Quality Guidelines for marine and freshwater recreational areas, the New Zealand Guidelines for Cyanobacteria in Recreational Freshwaters Interim Guidelines, and the National Policy Statement Freshwater Management. Human contact for recreation is a compulsory value of freshwater under the current NPSFM, relating to how people connect with water through recreational activities such as swimming, boating, and fishing. The purpose of the national guidelines for microbiological water quality and cyanobacteria are to help control the public health risks and to provide a framework for monitoring and reporting on the general health of recreational waters. The data obtained by this program is used to communicate health risks to community so they can make informed choices about where and when to swim. The national guidelines also provide guidance for establishing roles and responsibilities for regional, local, and public health authorities. And the National Policy Statement Water Management indicates that regional councils are the primary agency responsible for sampling and notification of elevated results. This report presents the annual summary, and I'd like to acknowledge the work of the environmental monitoring and also the communications team in delivering this program. And I welcome any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions, Councillor?
Yeah, I've got a question. For your monitoring sites, how do you determine what sites you're going to monitor? So based on the potential risk or the amount of use, or?
Yes, so it's based on known popular recreation sites. And there has been consultation with community in the past, most recently as part of the proposed land and water plan process. And there's also some consideration given to having regional coverage and representation across the FMUs.
But my other question is cyanobacteria. So there's a photo of it in your paper, all green and that nice. Does it always represent as like that colour, or can it be like a dark flaky? Or is it always like that colour?
No, there is kind of a range of colours that can present. Most frequently we see in Otago there's kind of that murky pea soupy colour, but it can be other colours as well.
Yeah, just for awareness if you're.
Yeah, we have a range of images on our website and lots of information about how to identify cyanobacteria. So, and also on the LAWA website, they have a range of images as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Alexa.
Just wondering how this all, this is a little bit off your paper, but which is fine, but it's, how this all works in with LAWA and the territorial authorities. There were quite a few issues in Queenstown last summer, and very often when people questioned, things didn't show up on LAWA, but there'd be signs on waterfront. And when I questioned the council about that and going, well, you know, our contractor has put out signs because there might be a problem. It's sort of, that seems a little bit random to me in terms of how we can actually put a message out that when water is or isn't safe. And I do understand the lag in E. coli, but I also understand the hoteliers that are really upset when their beach in front of them is a sign on saying no swimming, but the LAWA site still says it's fine. How can, is there a way of bringing this together in a better way?
Yeah, there are some challenges there. So the LAWA presents regional council data and regional council monitoring sites. And so it would be up for other authorities like LDC to work with LAWA if they wanted to show other information or to communicate with us. And so we did put quite a bit of effort into kind of trying to streamline some of those processes and communication, because we did have contractors putting up signs for different reasons and not that information wasn't always getting through to us in a timely way. We did get to the point where we were able to add some warnings to LAWA in some instances. So it's just something that we need to continually work on through improving those communication pathways. But it is a challenge.
Just to briefly add to that, so I think some of the experience you described there was related to the work that Helen and the team do here is primarily focused on testing and test results. So the tests come back with a result. That result then leads to an action or a grading. QLDC at times had either suspected wastewater overflows or other things that would have been or could have been causative in terms of contaminating water for swimming, and so put out signs proactively to deal with that. So they've and in some cases left them up for some time, and so in terms of that that balance, often they didn't have a positive test, rather than just they put things up as a proactive measure after an event.
I'm not sure where we go with this, but we've got in our Lake Wakatipu at Queenstown Bay has been suitable for swimming the whole time. It hasn't had anything. And yet there was at least 1 week in the height of summer where the signs were up and people were really concerned. And I don't know what we do, and I realise that it's a little bit beyond our remit, but somehow there needs to be some.
Well, what we have done is established with QLDC or reiterated the importance that they provide us timely notification of when those things happen, either through a pollution hotline, and we've also asked them to directly notify the science team so that we can directly feed to LAWA. So we hope that will be improved next season, and for anything that happens in the meantime.
I guess that's all we can do. Thank you.
Okay, cool. If we've got no other hands up for questions, Elliot, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just around that report cards at the end, really glossy and well presented. Just wondering where it goes, if we send it anywhere or try and get that out to the community.
It's generally published to our website. But we could look at other ways of disseminating that to community.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool. So we're basically just a note and report. I'm happy to note it. Is there a seconder, Elliot? You're happy to second it. Does anybody wish to say anything? I think I'm just going to briefly say that I do actually look forward to these reports. I think these are reports that the community can really resonate with, because swimming is a very hot topic and pastime for the community. And so when I look at the graphs, there's a lot of green there, and when you add the green and the orange together, then it is showing that by and large our rivers are in a really good state, and we are able to enjoy them generally most of the time. So I think it's a good report card. I would hope that would be the case. So that's all I have to say. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks very much. Thanks, Helen. Right, we'll move to paper 9.9, CDM partnership report.
So this one's me. We have our staff over here. We'll make it. This report you receive every 6 months. It summarizes our performance against the CDM partnership agreement, and I will take the paper as read and answering questions.
Right, thanks, Tom. Questions? Sorry, I meant to say thanks, Ben, too, for sitting in the room all that time. Questions? Tim.
Yeah, Tom, I know this is one of our service performance measures that I think could be orange at the moment in terms of getting the number of qualified or trained staff suitable for civil defence work. Is there a way of thinking outside the box and getting more people involved with civil defence? I know it's the sort of thing that may not happen for months and months and months, years, and then all of a sudden we have an incident. So any thoughts around that?
Yeah, we've been watching that closely. So it's obviously an important part of our function is to be able to provide staff in any kind of emergency. At the moment, we're providing staff at levels that would get us through most events, but obviously not achieving those targets in terms of the partnership agreement. We do need to do some more work to try and get that moving. We had a few actions that came in late last year. In terms of how pay is allocated for overtime and managing those kind of long run events and the remuneration benefits that staff receive for those. And that's all embedded now, and we did expect that we'd see some change in uptake after that, but as you can see from the report, probably not as good as we would have hoped. So within the next 6 months, we'll start rolling out some more recruitment campaigns and targeting staff from certain areas of the business to get them on board. We've done a little bit of that in the past, but a bit of renewed vigour should make a bit of a difference.
So if the Alpine Fault goes tomorrow, have we have got staff that will be able to facilitate a civil defence response?
Yeah, we do at the levels kind of outlined there, and if that situation were to occur, we would be able to draw in other people and train them as we go. But obviously, the better situation would be that we've fully staffed and a bit more resilient to those types of events. But we would be able to get through.
Thanks.
Just, I want to say quickly to that too, Tim, it's a good question. In those significant large-scale events, we would receive a significant amount of support from the national agency, which would include surge staff from all other parts of the country. So I think it's good to think about how we would be able to respond to a large event, but also be realistic about what the expectation on ORC would be in that event, and having those strong relationships through the National Emergency Management Agency becomes critical, because an event like that would be run nationally. It wouldn't be run out of the Otago office. We would be supporting, obviously we'd have a key role to play, but we would be supporting a national response to an emergency of that scale.
Thanks. Okay, cool, thanks. Any more questions, Kevin? Yeah, on page 7, support development, implementation, maintenance of a regional council recovery plan. So that, I'm assuming that's if we have a catastrophic loss in our building, how do we get up and going again? Is that what that refers to?
Yeah, that's right.
So where is that plan at?
So my understanding is at the moment we've got a number of procedures or plans for certain areas, but we haven't pulled those together into a collective coherent, one document sort of plan. But that's plans to get a bit of momentum in the next financial year.
And if I could just go back to the previous question about getting support from a national level, one of the things that I was informed of and was quite open discussion was about when the major event happened in the Hawke Bay, was that the national group did come in and take over, but there was a reasonably major breakdown in communication with locals. So what learnings have been taken from that, and how would we ensure that the locals are probably the key communicators with other locals are going to form part of that response?
Yeah, I can jump on that one. So I think the key, there's been a significant number of learnings out of the East Coast events on the North Island, and there's a number of reviews being undertaken, and that was one of the findings. The discussion we've had at the Joint Committee and the Chief Executive Group is that the plans that we put in place become critical, because if we have robust plans in place that have been agreed by the civil defence, the members of the civil defence group, they are the plans that will be followed. So if there's nothing in place, then the national group will rightly come in and put something in place and get on with the response. So we need to have very clear plans that we've worked on with all of those stakeholder agencies. So in an event, when we do get surge capacity to support, which we will, we can point to these plans as the way in which the community are prepared to respond. So that planning piece becomes critical.
So you're confident that we're far enough down that if we had a major soon, and I hope we don't, are we far enough down that planning regime to?
Yeah, I think, are we far enough down? There's still work to be done. You know, there's been significant work done recently, particularly on the AF8 event. And there's been testing of different things in Queenstown and a lot of work done with the communities to understand AF8. There's learnings to be taken out of the.
Yes. 35 minutes later.
Yeah. Just
learnings taking out of the North Island events that will need to be applied as well. So I'm confident that Matt and his team have done some very good work in that planning space, and they have got good connections with the stakeholder agencies across Otago. I think there's, you know, as with anything, there's still some more work that can be done, and applying some of those lessons from the North Island events as part of that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Any other questions? No? Okay. Do we, again, just a noting report? Just that it's a good report, but we're noting it.
Happy to move.
Andrew, you're moving, thank you. Is there a seconder? Tim, you're seconding, thank you. Any discussion? I'll put it, all in favour? Aye. Against, carried, thank you. Right, we are moving to paper 9.10, last paper of the day, Otago Region Natural Hazards Exposure. Welcome everyone. Jean-Luc, I'll let you do introductions and introduce the paper, please.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. So just first I want to introduce the team. So we've got Andrew Welch, he's a special analyst in the natural hazard team, and Tim Van Noorden, a senior natural hazard analyst. Both have been critical in the work that we present today. So I'm very pleased to present this report and work. This is the first time we do a comprehensive regional scale exposure assessment. And the first time we present that work to committee. This work is a critical step in making sure our work programs in natural hazards are that we don't have blind spots, they are thorough and fair. And it's quite a complex topic, so Tim is going to present the work in more detail. Got about 15 minutes, 20 minutes presentation of the work, the terminology, the word used in that work. And yeah, we'll be very happy to take questions after that.
Cool, thank you, Jean-Luc. And yeah, just as an introduction,
just your mic, please. Sorry, thanks.
Yeah, this project has been in the works for a wee while, so we're very happy to come and present now the final result of this step of the analysis. And just to cover off what I'll talk about is introduce the wider work program, and then this piece of analysis itself. We run through kind of what we did and what the limitations are of that work, and then the key findings and what we've done with them so far. Touch on the next steps, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion as well. So we've got a region-wide natural hazards assessment program, and we've presented a very similar diagram to this in a previous paper, but just showing that the piece of analysis we're presenting today is kind of one step of a wider work program. Look at natural hazards exposure. We've previously presented in November last year a prioritisation approach. So the two of those items put together will feed into our next step, which is to use that natural hazard exposure analysis findings and other information
feed into that natural hazards prioritisation approach. And then that itself will feed into our planning for our natural hazard work programs and feed into planning for the next LTP. So firstly, we've done a systematic review of Otago's natural hazards exposure. What is exposure? It's simply the overlay of what is exposed, what are the elements at risk within the mapped extents of the various natural hazards around the region. So it's really trying to answer the key question, how many people or buildings or other critical facilities are exposed to potential natural hazard impact, and where are they? And the key point there is that it's a region-wide review. It doesn't drill down into massive detail for any single location, but it's a tool to help comparison at that regional level. So yeah, how are we going to use this work? It's broad, high-level data sets for use in that kind of screening comparison across the region. It'll be a key piece of information feeding into prioritisation work. And it's also helped us just look at possible information gaps in what we understand about natural hazards at the regional scale. And then help us think about it. Is there any new information or studies we need? Do we have any blind spots that we need to fill? What the analysis doesn't show, it's not showing property scale information. And that's pretty simply for the reason that the natural hazards information that's feeding into that process is also pretty broad scale and not suitable for that usage. It's also looking at exposure only rather than risk at this stage, and that will be a next step to take this information and others to start looking at risk. Okay, so what did we do? We took looking at the left-hand side of this diagram, took several input data sets, some natural hazards mapping and data sets for the different elements we were considering. There was population, buildings, and critical facilities, which were things like hospitals, healthcare facilities, and emergency services, and the civil defence operations centres. And the other key data set was the statistical areas, or what we called community areas in the report. So we broke the region down into a series of geographic areas, and then we've completed analysis for each of those 351 across the region. We used all those inputs in software called Riskscape, developed by GNS and NIWA as a tool for doing this type of natural hazard analysis. And then we've got a series of outputs out the other end of that. So a series of different exposure measures for each of those community areas. Got a classified exposure level as a kind of overview for each of those locations. And then also we can aggregate up those different calculated measures and come up with totals for each urban area, each district, or the region as a whole. And we'll show a couple of examples of those. It just shows in a little bit more detail the input data sets. So there was 9 different natural hazards mapping data sets used in the GIS analysis, covering off 4 different types of hazards more broadly. So flooding, seismic hazards, slope stability, and coastal. And then each of those was overlaid with the elements at risk. You can see on the right-hand side of the table, which were the usually resident population buildings and critical community facilities, and you can see those defined there. So I'll spend a little bit of time on the limitations. So as a, I guess, a broad regional scale study, there's a lot of things we could have done but haven't at this stage, as it's I guess trying to keep things at a sort of high screening level. So, for example, we've used all of our regional scale hazards mapping. We do have more detailed mapping and more detailed studies for a lot of specific locations. We haven't considered those at this stage, just so we're dealing with a consistent data set across the region, and that we're hopefully comparing apples and apples. We have identified there's some knowledge gaps, or there's data sets we don't have in terms of natural hazards, at least not with full region-wide coverage. For example, pluvial flooding, that's flooding from rainfall runoff. The other is, for instance, landslide susceptibility. And also there's some, we haven't looked at, for instance, scenarios for individual hazard events. For example, the Alpine Fault as a particular event. Similarly, for elements at risk, there's modelling and assumptions feeding into development of those data sets. One key thing to note is that we haven't looked at Lifeline's infrastructure at this stage. And again, that has been looked at through the Lifelines group within civil defence over the last couple of years. But now that they've finished that work and we've finished this work, we'll be meeting up and discussing with them, if there's benefits to feed some of that Lifeline's infrastructure through this similar analysis process as well. A couple of things to note about the methods. There's assumptions required around the impact or exposure for the hazard extents, and particularly note the exposure shown for the areas of the ORC flood schemes assumes an over-design flood extent. So it's illustrating the residual risk. So I guess at the highest level, summary of results. These are the numbers across the region for the different types of hazards down the rows and different and the exposure for those various elements across. And it's even at this level, at the region-wide view, you can see it's a pretty useful tool. For the first time, we've had to go up putting numbers to the exposure and really moving beyond just having mapping for these different hazard extents. And you can see river and lake flooding and liquefaction have this highest exposure. See numbers down through to the coastal hazards. I should say I'm giving only a very brief snapshot here. You've got access to the full technical report, and that goes into, it provides similar tables district by district, for example, and for each hazard type. So there's a lot more detail available. But another way to summarise those results is to look at each hazard over each urban area and calculate up or assess the top 10 by population for amount of exposure. And again, it's a quick tool to give a summary of that snapshot at the regional level. And again, just a first tool to start thinking about, for example, of these hazards or areas identified which ones have or haven't already had detailed assessments, which ones do or don't have hazard mitigation in place, as an example. In terms of communications, we've got a project webpage which is now live, which gives both links to the technical report and the committee paper, but also a link to an online data viewer, which is now live as of earlier today, which is a more interactive and visual way to zoom in and out around the region, and look at those exposure levels and the mapping for each hazard. In terms of our next steps from here, have continued engagement with civil defence and the territorial authorities. Also got meetings with the Civil Defence Lifelines group, and meeting also the Insurance Council of New Zealand and the Natural Hazards Commission, just to have a discussion on the project as well. And then the two kind of longer term next steps. One is starting that natural hazard prioritisation process, which is planned to run over the next 12 months or so, and to inform the development of the next LTP. And the other step is to go back and review and possibly revise this exposure analysis as needed. And as examples of when we might do that, there's, for instance, quite a few national level hazards data sets in development. There's liquefaction modelling for the country. There's landslide susceptibility modelling across the country. Also a national flood hazard assessment. So a number of other data sets that once we've got them, would be great to incorporate into this type of work to update it. That was all for now, so I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for that, and for the good work. So what we will be doing eventually is noting the report, but we'll also be endorsing the report, the Otago Regional Natural Hazard Exposure Analysis, and noting our next steps. So I'll just open that up for questions now on all of that. Thank you.
Tim, when this information is shared with the TAs, do you expect that they will be influenced from a planning perspective or very much from a natural hazards perspective in terms of taking note of the information? I know it's a high level analysis, but what do you expect the action from the TAs?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're not entirely sure what they're going to do, but we've had a meeting with them while we're still developing this project, to explain what we're doing and the type of information that would be available, and that's now all been passed on to them. So it's really, I guess, in their court a little bit. John Lake?
Yeah, one way they could decide to use it is to inform the high-level planning, so the future development, high-level spatial planning, not necessarily district plan. It's not district plan detailed enough, but I think the high-level planning for future development for some areas, I think that information would be very useful.
So, thank you.
Thank you. More questions? Given. Yeah. Sorry, Elliot. It was Elliot. Please given.
Yeah, it is obviously very comprehensive, important report. Just wondering around AFA, presumably that is not considered an active fault, just given the numbers seen on there, or was that?
That's right. So we considered only active faults within the Otago region. So that was looking at the potential fault rupture hazard. So Alpine fault wasn't considered as a specific hazard scenario. in this assessment.
And then on that list as well, is that considered a comprehensive, like, in terms of, are those the highest risk hazards that we have in Otago, or are there other hazards that we haven't incorporated here? I'm just thinking about like pluvial, is it that they're outside of our remit, pluvial flooding and, I don't know, forest fires? And
yeah, so we considered the hazards where we have good region-wide natural hazards mapping coverage. And that's the reason things like pluvial flooding, wildfire are not included.
So we just don't have the data for those.
That's right.
Are we planning on getting the data for those at some point?
Pluvial flooding is generally, it's a stormwater driven issue, so generally managed at the TA level. For wildfire, there's nothing yet.
But just for wildfire, that's something we are considering and working with civil defense and friends around what's needed. So we presented a paper to the committee about a year ago, highlighting the fact that there's a lot of information out there, but we need to make sure that there are gaps. We're key on who needs to fill that gap. So we are in the phase of discussing this. We did to bring something into the next long-term plan if we need to do something at a regional council.
Cool. Good to hear those discussions are happening. And then the other question I had was just around coastal erosion. Is that the same reason why that's limited to Waitaki?
That's right. Yes, we've had coastal erosion modelling done for the Waitaki district. In fact, also for the Clutha Delta, just as a smaller scale study. But for Dunedin City District and Clutha District, we don't yet have that work completed, but it's I believe it's in progress, at least for the Clutha.
Cheers.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kevin. And then Richard.
Well, just with this being a high level at this stage, and you're going to dig deep in once you prioritise. So I just want what is the purpose of going to the New Zealand Insurance Council at this particular stage?
It's just to have a general discussion, more general than focusing on this particular analysis report. Just to understand kind of how the insurance industry considers natural hazard information and how that is used in their decision making, because that's a question that gets asked of us every now and then. So just to understand what feeds into that decision, those decisions. So.
Just as a follow-up to that, Tim, does that do you see a day where these hazards will come down to that property level and be on everybody's property information on their limbs?
Possibly, but I think that's probably prohibitive to do at the full regional scale. And even where we do detailed local scale hazards and risk assessments, even then they're not generally designed to be used at that scale, property scale.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Kevin, we'll jump back to you.
I apologise, this probably isn't a question, but insurance companies are already doing that to that level based on natural hazard mapping, and that's been going on for probably the major companies for the last 8 to 10 years. And
so this work feeds into that?
It's already been done by them. I just wonder. I'm really wondering about what the gain of is going to the insurance council with information that is not, other than allowing them that we have more hazards than they possibly think we have. And if that data isn't sufficient, it will create a reaction that is not good for the people in the area. I'd like to have that discussion in more depth, really, knowing that industry reasonably well.
Yeah, well, we can.
I'm not trying to hide anything from anyone,
Yeah,
it's
no.
just the way that approach is actually taken because.
Yeah, well, I've just got one comment on that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Is that there's no new natural hazards information used in this analysis. The natural hazard mapping data sets that we used, we've had and have been publicly available for 5 or 10 years or more. So it's kind of presenting the existing information in a different format maybe, but it's, you know, there's nothing all that new there.
Yeah, I think like it's always important to keep dialogue up with interested agencies like insurance companies, banks, all of that sort of stuff when it comes to our natural hazards information, the information we're holding. Primarily those risk assessments you talked about before that would be run by the insurance companies will have been based off of data sets that either we or national agencies have produced, and other types of data sets that have fed into this analysis. But yeah, happy to have a further conversation around what that would look like and try to draw on the experience if you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Question.
It might be somewhere, but I was just wondering whether this approach had been done other places in New Zealand. Or how we fit in the national context.
Yep, it definitely has. And as examples, there's couple of national scale exposure assessments completed in the last few years. So one for river flooding and one for coastal hazards and sea level rise. And we've followed a very similar approach to those studies. But yeah, we are one of the few, I think, that has tried to look at exposure across the full region and for the kind of full set of different types of natural hazards.
Okay, cool. Alan.
Thanks. No, I wonder if you could just give us a bit more detail of where this is taking us. And I've got council paper, page 261 in front of me, which is that very nice diagram you showed us earlier, indicating in the red box where this fits into the scheme. But it's taking us through into that prioritisation process, which we've had previous papers on, and then this prioritisation output. Now, my understanding is that in there we'd include some of that additional information, additional data sets you've talked about, like the lifelines information, and perhaps information that the report talked about, like the taking into account the tourist population in Queenstown, for example. So where's all this taking us? If that's sort of my question in the end, I think.
Sure. Yeah. So that that prioritisation process that we've previously talked about and presented. There's a series of steps defined there to work through both first identification of locations and then preliminary risk assessment and consideration of other factors as well. This natural hazards exposure analysis is just one piece of information there. And as I said previously, we've got for a lot of locations, we've got a lot of more detailed local scale natural hazard and risk information, and also just information on other types of assets also particularly exposed to those hazards, whether they're lifelines or other community assets. So the purpose of that next step is really to take a more detailed look at individual areas that we couldn't do at this region-wide scale, and then to use that again as another step in a systematic way to looking at our hazards work program and where we do adaptation and hazard management activities.
And thanks. And that should be available by the look of it in about another year. Is that the idea?
That's right.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any more questions? We're just about done. So basically we have, let's go back to the recommendations. We've got 3 recommendations. We're noting the report. We're endorsing the report Otago Regional Natural Hazards Exposure Analysis, and we're noting the next steps in the work program, including commencement of the Natural Hazards Prioritisation Workstream. I think we could take all of those together. Someone prepared to move that?
Yep.
Gretchen and Elliot has seconded it. Any discussion? Everyone's happy? Oh, Gretchen, go for it.
I just think it's important to mark that it's a significant milestone for this council, and as has been pointed out, puts us in a really strong position. Not many regions in New Zealand have this level of information, which will help us exactly to prioritise our efforts. New Zealand has a number of different hazards, so knowing where best to prioritise will be really, really helpful. So just a really big thanks to staff who put in a huge amount of effort here and waded through a whole heap of different databases and reports and put it into a format that's really usable for the public and for us in our decision making as well. So massive thanks.
Yes, comments. Okay, if we're all done, I'm going to put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, that's carried. Thanks very much. And that ends our papers for the day.
Next up, thank you. Pretty good.
Alan, you'll propose this for the RTO, please.
I certainly will, sure. Yes, here we go. Kia tau te rangi nāria e ki runga I ngā iwi o te ao. Let peace reign on all of us.
Great, thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks gentlemen. Meeting closed.